David Baldacci. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Now I know we actually spoke to you, I guess, in 2018 about the Will Roby series, Endgame. So check our archives for that, listeners. But this time we're talking about the seventh installment of the Memory Man series. It's called Long Shadows. Pick up a copy now. Remind our listeners the general premise of not only Memory Man, but then where this falls in the series.
So Amos Decker is the memory man. He was a professional football player, and then he suffered a traumatic brain injury on the field. He got blindsided on a kickoff, and he almost died on the field. And it caused his brain to acquire two attributes. One is hyperthymesia, which is perfect recall, and the other one is synesthesia. It's a commingling of sensory pathways. So he sees, for instance, dead bodies as an electric blue shade of color. Um, and so he left football, obviously, couldn't play anymore, became a policeman, then a detective in Ohio, and now he's a consultant for the FBI. And in this novel, something really traumatic happens to him in the beginning with someone he worked with for a long time. Then he gets partnered with a new partner, Frederica White, out of the FBI office in Baltimore, and they butt heads immediately. He doesn't want to work with her. And then they have to fly down to South Florida to investigate the murder of a federal judge and her bodyguard at her home.
Awesome. Yes. Everybody check it out. It's bound to be a page turner from David Baldacci. Always is. So how did you actually come up with the character to begin with? I'm always curious. Did you have football roots yourself, in Virginia? I know you grew up in Virginia around here and you listen to TOP all the time. So, but tell us about how did that come up with you? Did you ever have a concussion on the sidelines? I want to know.
Yeah, I played football in high school, and I've definitely had my share of pain stories, like everybody does. And I followed football for a long time. Obviously, we're in the DC area, so we follow now the Commanders. But I read,
Followed or be tortured by for 30 years.
yeah, yeah, it seems like the memories of Joe Gibbs and the Hogs have. I don't think even Amos Decker, with his perfect memory, could remember those.
There's the money soundbite. Thank you. But
There you go. So yeah, I read a book called Born on a Blue Tuesday about a guy who had hyperthymesia and synesthesia. So he saw days of the week as colors. And I started reading more about the brain. And I thought, well, this is really interesting that you can have a traumatic brain injury and have open up these parts of your brain that you never really had access to before. And so I could make this player a football player that would explain how he got the traumatic brain injury. That's certainly plausible. Unfortunately, it's a very violent sport, and then to use that in a new career as a policeman and then a detective. So I thought that would be a really cool sort of undertaking. That's really where Amos Decker was born from.
exactly. And I kind of like that idea of that something that could be deemed an injury or a negative thing actually turns into a positive and unlocks a part of maybe that all of us human beings might have it somewhere in there. We just don't know how to properly access it or whatever. So I appreciate it. Well, the idea of the memory man, perfect recall, all that stuff. I remember growing up reading, what was it, the Cam Jansen books, and she had photographic memory. But so what kind of stuff did you grow up reading in Virginia? Well, and remind us where in Virginia you did grow up too.
Yeah, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, the capital, and was there until I went to college at VCU in Richmond, and then I went to law school at UVA in Charlottesville, and then I moved up to DC to practice law for about 10 years in the 80s and 90s. Um, and I was a kid. I loved reading. I remember the first book I ever read. I think I was 5 or 6 years old. It was called The Magic Squirrel. It was based on a Russian parable, and that was the first time I could ever remember achingly wanting to get back to a book. I'd read it and I'd go to school and I wanted to get back to it and just fall in this magical world. Yeah, years later, I went back and bought a first edition of it off the internet and have it at the house. And I love mysteries, Sherlock Holmes. I remember reading the Blue Carbuncle in a Reader's Digest condensed version. The first time I'd ever been experienced, Sherlock Holmes, and I finished it going, gee, I hope he's written other stuff.
That guy has something.
Yeah, I had something. And then, I read the Agatha Christie's of the world, and I was a political science major in college, so I read lots of works devoted to that discipline. Lots of literary fiction, lots of commercial fiction, biographies, nonfiction. I've just been a reader my whole life, and my parents would take us to the library every weekend, and I got to travel the world through books.
Awesome. And we get to travel the world through your books. So thanks for passing it on. Well, speaking of, literacy as a kid and all, getting hooked on reading as a young kid, tell us about the Wish You Well Foundation. I know, I guess you and your wife started it in Virginia to combat illiteracy. Talk about, why that's such an important cause for you.
Yeah, we funded programs and initiatives across the country, pretty much all 50 states and counting. We just are financing the creation of a literacy center in rural Virginia that will help people from all ages learn higher reading skills, better cognitive skills, work skills, and have access to lots of books. Look, it's not just about reading the next book on the bestseller list. This is about being a citizen in the democracy. We are flooded with information every day and disinformation every day. And if you don't have the cognitive and reading skills to be able to cut through the chaff, you're going to make decisions based on stuff that's just not true. We're the world's longest surviving democracy. We're about 250 years old. Compared to other countries, that's just a blip in time. There's no guarantee we will continue to be a democracy, but we can't be a democracy if we have an electorate that's not well informed and well read. And so for us, eradicating illiteracy is, if we get rid of illiteracy, most of the social ills we have as a country fall away. Everything from social ills, poverty, crime, go away, because it's all based on people not being able to be self-sustaining, not being able to be in the mainstream. So if we do away with those things, and I'll tell you, there's people who have the job of determining how many prison beds need to be built in the future, because they take a long time to build. They use two metrics that are about a 99% accuracy rate. One is high school graduation dropout rate, and fourth grade reading skills. If the dropout rate goes up, we need more prison beds. If the reading test scores go down, we need more prison beds. That's all you need to know about the importance of that in our society.
Wow. Yeah. In fact, I can hear the passion of not only, literature and reading, but you tying in the political science there. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like reading to you, and I agree with you, is, reading and literacy is fundamental to our democracy. And when we spoke to you last time, you'd already had this foundation going, but it seems, in recent years, I'm not going to cite any examples, but we all know what we're talking about. I mean, it seems like democracy is a little on the ropes these days. So is your work you're doing a little more important now than ever?
It is. It really is. I mean, I feel like many people that we're sort of staring down the precipice. And I mean, look, in 2022, I didn't think, I've been on this radio tour since 7:30 this morning. I've already fielded a bunch of calls from people about, what do you think about this new wave of book banning and book burning?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, look, as a student of history, I can tell you that it's nothing new. It's a time-worn playbook, but book burning and book banning never have a good outcome. They always have a cataclysmic outcome. And so you don't expect it to be any different this time around. But I never thought in 2022 I had to be talking about that. But here we are.
I know. And yes, I mean, I just finished watching that amazing Ken Burns U.S. and the Holocaust thing, and yes, book burning is a part of that whole road. And I'm not saying we're going down that path, but it's always possible when you start going down the route. If you start banning books, if you start, it's a slippery slope. So anyway, I appreciate you talking with us. Before we run, do you, David Baldacci, have perfect recall on anything? Is there a certain thing, if I say like a year, you can name the book that came out, you know what I mean? Like what? Because that's me with movies, but I want to know, do you have a perfect recall on anything?
I wish that I did. Sometimes I get close, but I'm a good Jeopardy player. We do Jeopardy. Yeah. I do pretty well on Jeopardy, but I can't claim to have the prowess that Amos Decker has.
Well, that's why you got to read Long Shadows. Pick it up now. I really appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Same here. Thank you. Take care.
All right.